Hi, I'm Carrie and welcome to my knitting studio. We're currently waiting for the impending snowstorm to hit us here in a couple of hours, so I figured what better than to sit down and record a podcast about all of the knitting that I've been working on over the past few weeks. So today I have a lot to share about. I have 5 finished objects and 2 works in progress, and then a couple of things that I'm hoping to get cast on soon. So let's go ahead and get started. Today I'm wearing my Rocky Fork pullover. This is a design from a few years back that I did for Ann Hansen of Bare Naked Wools, and this is knit up in the Better Breakfast DK in the Daybreak color. I absolutely love this. I love wearing it every winter. Of course, it gets put away during not the cold seasons, but it's just a great classic sweater. It's seamed set and sleeve construction with pretty ribbing details. So I'll stand up here so you can see a beautiful ribbed kind of V neckline situation, but it actually has a crew neck, but you get the effect of a V. And I'll zoom out just a bit here as well so you can kind of see the whole thing. So yeah, just seam set and sleeves, 2x2 ribbing at the cuffs and at the hem as well. A little bit of ribbing at the side panels. And yeah, it's a sweater that I absolutely love. On to finished objects. I had a ton of finished knits right at the end of 2025, just kind of trying to squeak some projects in right at the end of the year, both wrapping up some longer term sweater projects, as well as throwing in a bunch of last minute holiday accessories that I seem to always do. So I knit up quite a few hats right at the end of the year, and I guess also technically one of them flipped over to the start of the year as well. So if you watched my Everything I Knit in 2025 video, you have seen some of these finished objects, but there is the one that was a 2026 finish. So let's go ahead and get into it. So my first finish is my double Vee Tee, and this is just a fingering weight pullover that I cast on in I think July, and it took me all the way to December to actually finish because I kept picking it up, putting it down, picking it up, putting it down, and I wasn't consistently working on it. Or, I mean, I did in the spurts that I did have it on the needles, but I kept setting it aside to work on other things. So it took me way longer than it ever reasonably should have. That being said, it is a fingering weight sweater, so those do take a little bit longer to knit, especially a fingering weight sweater with long sleeves. Of course, if you don't have sleeves on it and it's just like a t-shirt, goes significantly faster because there's no sleeves to knit. But I love fingering weight sweaters. They are a staple of my wardrobe, and they also have a lot longer wearing time horizon than thicker sweaters like the one I'm wearing today. So I can start wearing these thinner fingering weight sweaters much earlier in fall, and I can't wear my thicker ones until we're deeper in winter. So it is really nice to have these lighter weight sweaters to get just a longer wearing time frame out of them. So let me go ahead and try this one on for you, and I will talk through the details. So this is my double Vee Tee on. I love the open neckline here. It has a V both at the front and at the back, and the V at the front is a little bit deeper than the one at the back. Technically it's reversible, so you could have a shallower V that kind of ends at the collarbone if you wanted that look, but I like the deep V in front for the nice open look. And this is a new design that will hopefully be coming at some point this year in 2026. I'm hoping maybe around the midpoint of the year, since I have another sweater that I need to get going before then. So I'll go ahead and stand up and show you the fit of this one in details. So here is the finished fit of my double Vee Tee. I absolutely love how this turned out. The standout feature on this top not only is the double V neckline, but also the lateral braid details throughout. So there are lateral braids along the shoulders, a more dainty lateral braid detail here at the sleeve cuff, finished with an I-cord neckline. And then I'm not sure if you're going to be able to, we're trying to get to the right height and zoom point here, but there is lateral braiding all along the bottom hem here as well. Maybe I'll get a close-up photo so you can see this detail a little bit better, but there's kind of a, from here to here, there is lateral braiding at the hem of this one, and also again I-cord to finish it off. And here it has that split hem. It is a top-down drop shoulder construction with a slim sleeve. This is just one of the nicest silhouettes that so easily fits into my wardrobe. I also have several commercial long sleeve t-shirts that have a really similar fit to this, where you have drop shoulder construction, a relatively slim sleeve, and then not super fitted body, but it's also not an oversized body by any stretch of the imagination. The garment here is a 38-inch bust circumference, which is about the same as, or maybe a little bit bigger than my full bust. I range between like 37 to 38 on my full bust. And then of course you have a little bit more ease through the body since my waist is smaller than my full bust is. So it's just kind of like a nice fit that skims a little bit but is super comfortable to wear. I absolutely love it. I'm so pleased with how this one turned out. I love the yarn that I used. It is a sock yarn from Leading Men Fiber Arts. It's the Showstopper sock base, and that's just kind of one of those traditional 75-25 merino nylon blends with like a relatively high yardage content. So like I think it's 460 or 62 yards per 100 grams. So it's definitely on the lighter fingering side, but it's also like the best garment fabric. Once you've worn a sweater that has this gauge, this feel, you will be a fingering weight sweater convert. It does mean that you'll probably knit fewer sweaters throughout the year, but I think it is totally worth it. So again, the pattern for this one will be coming later this year since I'm working on another sweater pattern right now. I'm finally getting my Rockmill cardigan pattern together. So that one is starting to get ever closer to finally being ready for preview knitting. I've been working on it for like an hour every day after I put my daughter to bed. So just like slowly chugging away at all of the steps that I need to do. A lot of the work I'd actually already done last year, but there's just like so many steps that are involved in bringing a knitting pattern from like spreadsheet into pattern that you can use that is just taking a little bit of time. Anyway, it's a whole process. It takes a while, but I am plugging away at it. So that one will hopefully be getting ready for preview knitting here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm very excited about that. And then once I have that one wrapped up, I will be diving straight into the work for this one here, since that is the next sweater that I have ready to go for pattern stuff. And again, it's kind of in a similar state. I did a lot of the work for this last year, but there's still a lot of work to be done before it can be a real pattern. My next finished object is the Harlow Sweater by Kadri, and I absolutely love this one. This is the first adult sweater that I've knit in a while by another designer, and I had a really lovely experience with this. There definitely are some things about the pattern that like I wish were, I don't know, a little bit different, as in like I wish there was a schematic. Schematics are really useful, especially if you want to make any adjustments. Technically, all of the information that I personally wanted is like sourceable via the pattern text, but you just have to like do work to understand what you're getting. So like, what's the cuff circumference going to be? I take the gauge and I take the number of stitches at the cuff, and then I can get the measurement. So it just means that I have to do a little bit of work that normally like me as a designer, I do for my knitters, so that you don't have to do that work. So it was not provided, not the end of the world, especially for something like this that's kind of like an oversized sweatshirty thing. But technically it's nice to have. The pattern itself is very clear. I didn't have any issues reading it or working through the instructions or anything. Again, it's a fairly straightforward pattern. It is a top-down drop shoulder design with like relatively minimal shaping. So you have shaping at the shoulders to, you know, be shaped like a human body at the shoulders. And the shaping is at the, here, let me turn it around. The shaping's at the back shoulders, and you have this really pretty little, it's an I-cord detail here at the back shoulder. And I did it as an I-cord cast on as opposed to just a straight I-cord because I thought it was going to be easier to pick up the stitches for, you know, for the body. I'm so glad that I changed this to be an I-cord cast on as opposed to just knitting an I-cord and then having to like pick up after, because it's just a little bit fiddly. So that was a little mod that I did to make it a little bit easier on myself. And now I can't remember where I was going with this. Oh yes, you have short row shaping at the back shoulders and then no short row shaping at the front shoulders. So the slope is all at the back, and then just at the front you have the front kind of wrapping over the slope of the shoulder to get that extra length that you need there. And then once you have the back, you of course pick up the fronts for the shoulders. You have a nice crew neckline. I thought the shaping of the neckline was really nice. It's a really nice round shape, so no complaints there about the shaping. And you also get like a nice little detail there with where the shaping is placed. So you have that like 2-stitch column to the side of the neck shaping, so that's very pretty. And then it's a straight body to the hem. The sleeves are slightly tapered, also with that 2x2 ribbing at the cuff. And I did do do two things to make this like slightly more me in terms of the overall fit and aesthetic. So first I went down a size. So for a lot of these oversized patterns, they recommend like a ton of positive ease. I do appreciate positive ease, but I don't usually like to have that much positive ease. I just generally feel like it's overwhelming on my frame. So I went down a size from what is recommended for my bust circumference. So I knit a size small as opposed to a size medium to fit with my ease preferences. And then also on the sleeve, I tapered all the way down to the size small cuff. Again, just because this is oversized, but I didn't want the cuffs to be like flapping around everywhere. I didn't want the cuffs to be in the way as I was wearing it. So I just did a little bit more decreasing than was called for in the pattern to get down to the stitch count for the extra small. So slight tweak there. Really easy tweak to make, but it's just something that makes it a little bit more to my fit preferences versus the very oversized look that's presented in the pattern. All right, so here is this one on. It is like the cozy hand knit sweatshirt dream that I was going for. So I am so happy with how this one turned out. It is beautiful, soft, cozy. One thing that I was worried about this was that it was going to be too hot because it's 2 strands of fingering weight plus a strand of mohair, so definitely a thick cozy fabric. And also I knit it on, I think, size 5 or size 6 needles, but this is essentially a worsted weight yarn at a pretty tight gauge, so I was worried it was going to be like a little heavy, but it's perfect. And by perfect, I mean sometimes my office can't figure out its HVAC, and despite the fact that it is freezing outside, it's also freezing inside. Like you can kind of feel like a breeze from the HVAC, and it feels cold as opposed to warm. Anyway, so I was wearing this at the office the other day and I was still cold. I had to like use my desk blanket. Yes, I have a desk blanket at work because it gets really cold at work sometimes. Most often though, I use my desk blanket in the summertime when they're cranking the AC rather than in the winter. But this week was one of those days where I did indeed need my desk blanket in the winter. All right, so I'll go ahead and stand up and zoom out so you can see what this one looks like. So here is the Harlow sweater. It is beautiful. I love it. It is just a cozy oversized fit. Love the split hem here. As I said, I knit a size down. So instead of knitting a medium, I knit a small, and I also reduced down to a size extra small for the lower portion of the sleeve, just so it's like, you know, there's a little bit of room here, but it doesn't feel like overwhelming or crazy or like super floppy sleeves. So just, you know, nice sweatshirty, not super oversized kind of vibe. That's what I was going for. That's exactly what I got. So I absolutely love it. It's so cozy. I would absolutely knit this one again if I was looking for another sweatshirt kind of sweater. This has plenty of room to be able to wear another shirt underneath it. So my bicep is like here, and there's plenty of room below where my actual bicep is to make plenty of room for layering. So it's a great option for this time of year in the winter when you truly need warm clothes. You need to be able to layer and all of that. Oh, and then one more thing to mention, I forgot to mention another modification that I made. You'll notice that I have a crew neck here versus the kind of taller funnel neck that's in the pattern. And what I did to make the crew neck was to follow the instructions provided in the pattern for doing all of the pickup, and then I did an adjustment right before the bind off to make sure that the collar wasn't going to be popping away. It took actually quite a bit of trial and error because at first I was like, oh, I can just do a tubular bind off tightly and that should be totally fine. It was not fine, so I picked that out and tried again by doing decreases on the last round before the bind off. And because it's a 2x2 rib, at first I got lazy and I was like, oh, I'll just reduce the stitch count by half. And then I'll have a 1x1 rib, because if I, you know, knit 2 together, purl 2 together, then I'll have a 1x1 rib to easily be able to do a tubular bind off. That was technically could get it over my head, but it was absolutely too tight. When I was wearing it, you could just feel the edge of the neck pressing. So it was bearable, but like uncomfortable. I knew I was going to be unhappy with it. So definitely don't reduce down to like half the stitch count. And like, honestly, I knew that was going to be way too much decreasing. In that case, I was just like, oh, I'll do my tubular bind off loosely. and it'll be fine. It was not fine. I needed to again pull it back for a second time to try a solution for the third time. The third time was indeed the charm. So after I pulled out for the second time, I did a decrease of 1 stitch for every 4 stitches. So I ended up decreasing and also kind of rearranging my stitches in a way that I still ended up with a 1x1 rib result so that I could easily do a tubular bind off. So that worked really well, but yes, it was a little bit of trial and error to get the neckline exactly right. At this point, I'm so glad that I took the extra time to do it a few times, get it right, and now have a result that I love that isn't uncomfortable. It's actually very, very comfortable. It's comfortable, cozy, all of the things. So all of this to say, if you're not happy with something, fix it. You'll be so glad you did. So I haven't yet talked about the actual yarns that I used for this one. I did mention that I used 3 strands of yarn. So here are the yarns that I used for this one. I'll come up close so you can see. This is a highly variegated skein of Knit Picks Stroll that I got probably a decade plus ago, 12 or 13 years ago, 2013 or so. I've had this in my stash for a really long time, and actually I have a full skein of it left. So here's what it looks like as a full skein. So here's the full skein. And when I saw this color online, I thought it was going to be like less dramatic highs and lows. So a little bit more of a tonal versus a variegated. And once I received it, I was like, oh no, that's not gonna, you know, have the kind of effect that I want in a yarn, or at least a yarn for a sweater. So it just has kind of been sitting and marinating in my stash for a decade plus. And I'm so glad that I finally found a solution to use this yarn in a way that I actually love. So what I ended up doing was pairing it with 2 other yarns to be able to create this beautiful deep marl that you see here that for me is just so much more wearable. So I'll pop up and show those to you. So this is also Knit Picks Stroll, and I think this is like Planetarium or some very deep blue color, and this deep blue kind of matches back to the darkest colors in the variegated here. And then I also have a loft mohair in black. So all 3 of these layered together end up resulting in this beautiful fabric here. This is something again that I find super wearable, really, really lovely. So this yarn alone, I know that I would not have been happy with a sweater knit out of it. I wouldn't have liked it. I definitely would not have worn it. So pairing it with these other yarns was a great solution to not only get it out of my stash, but turn it into a sweater that I actually really, really love. So if you are dealing with a similar problem skein or problem sweater quantity that you're like, this isn't really what I thought, and I don't think I'm gonna like the finished object that comes out of it, try layering it with other colors. So either just like a marl alone or a marl that is also toned down with mohair. It really makes a huge difference and can turn something that's like highly variegated into, yes, there's absolutely variegation in here, but the marl combined with the mohair makes it really, really work. I have a couple of other sweater quantities of mohair that I want to use in a similar way to kind of help me problem solve some yarn that I have in my stash. So hoping to get to those projects maybe this year or next year, since I already have the mohair and I just need to like knit the sweaters, because this one ended up turning out so nicely, and I'm really excited about the potential of this strategy on other sweaters as well. Now on to my last minute accessories that I did right around the holidays. I have a lovely stack of hats here, so I'll just go in order of the order that I finished these in. I guess it's also kind of the order that I started them in as well. So first up, I have a hat that I knit for my husband, and this is just an improvised 1x1 rib hat. I did not use a pattern for this, and it has like little quadrant decreases at the top. Let me see if I can show that a little bit better. Here we go. Yeah, so it just has lovely quadrant decreases at the top. I think this turned out really nicely. It took a little bit of trial and error to get the decreases to do what I wanted. I initially had the decreases like being on the quadrant rib stitches here, but I decided I actually liked it better being decreases like of the rib column. So like each rib column eats up the stitches next to it, I guess is the best way that I can describe it. So each one of these decreases is a double decrease. So you get automatically back down to the 1x1 rib pattern. You don't need to do anything fiddly. So I really like the end result of this hat. I can throw it on for you, even though it is sized for my husband. I can kind of wear it too. So it's just a nice hat on me. It has a lot more slouch than it does on him. It's more of a beanie style on him, a nice turn up brim, and it's just a great, easy 1x1 rib hat. So I had a great time knitting it, and my husband loves it, so that's win for me. So the yarn that I used for the hat is UU Fibers You So Sporty, and it's just a nice 100% wool sport weight yarn. This is the color charcoal, and it's not like a heathered charcoal or anything. It's just kind of like a nice steely deep gray. So I have an extra skein and maybe like a half, so I absolutely do not need to buy 3 to get a single brim hat, but I figured that I could also knit a matching pair of fingerless mitts for my husband, so that's going to go on the docket at some point, but I want to work on a couple of other things first, but I will knit like a matching 1x1 rib pair of fingerless mitts. I'll probably just adapt my Cardigan mitts pattern to just be entirely 1x1 rib versus twisted rib with stockinette. So it'll, you know, match his hat and all of that. So at some point I'll get those on the needles, but that day is not today. I am really happy though to have a finished hat for my husband, since the last one that I knit him had gotten a hole in it, and he had also requested something that has a fold up brim for a little bit of extra warmth, so I was happy to knit that for him for Christmas. I cast it on right before Christmas, like 2 or 3 days before. I knit it in 2 days and he was able to open it on Christmas morning, so that was nice for me to be able to just sneak in a quick little gift knit for him. And then continuing on the gift knit train, all of these actually are gift knits for the rest of my finished objects. This is a little hat that I knit for my daughter, and this is the Sledding and Snowballs hat by Lena Matheson. It has columns of ribbing and cables, so it's a really simple, cute hat with just a nice, I guess it's a 2x1 rib at the brim and then up into the cable and rib pattern at the top here. And my primary mod that I did was just using different colors at the rib brim to create like a little rainbowish gradient sort of situation. So this was knit entirely with leftover yarns that I just have in my leftover yarn box, all just a variety of fingering weight leftovers. I think most of these are Knotty Pine Fiber Company, or at least a couple of them are Knotty Pine Fiber Company. And then this main color here was from a pair of socks that I knit in college that I knit one sock of. It was a colorwork sock, and I was like, I'm absolutely not knitting the second one. I like did my own color work chart and everything, and it was like okay, but I'm like, this isn't like a good enough chart for me to like want to have the other one and wear it. So I had already used the other color from the color work socks to knit another pair of socks, so there was at this point no way that I could have knit the matching sock that went with this color here. So I was like, okay, I don't really have any other projects in mind, so I'm gonna go ahead and take that yarn and use it for the main color of the hat. I probably still have a good amount that I could use for at least maybe like kid size, definitely kid size fingerless mitts or mittens or something like that, or maybe like another hat top. I haven't weighed it. I actually don't know how much exactly I have left, but there was plenty for me to knit this cute little kid-size hat. I knit the child size. My daughter is 3, and this definitely is a little bit of a snug fit on her. I did not check gauge though, so I cannot confirm whether this is turning out smaller than it should be. I did knit on the recommended needle size, but we all know that means nothing because everyone knits differently, and the important thing is meeting gauge. So no idea if this actually to gauge for the pattern, but it does fit my daughter. That being said, it is smaller than I thought it was going to be, so I'm this is probably going to be the only season that she's able to wear this hat before I need to knit her another one for like next winter. Not a big deal. Kids' hats are super easy, fast projects, but I was hoping to get maybe a little bit more longevity out of it. I mean, I guess I could also always like rip this out and redo it in a little bit of a bigger size. But I can also just like knit another one. I have plenty of leftover yarns that I could do something very similar to this. And then last gift knit is yet another hat. So my parents visited for Thanksgiving and my mom picked out this skein of yarn at the local yarn shop. I guess I'll go ahead and try this one on too, since it is adult sized. So it is a turquoise yarn from Wonderland Yarns with like kind of rainbowy stripes of other colors. It is very cute, and I'll come up a little bit closer so you can kind of see those rainbows. Definitely fun and like a really nice use of variegated yarn. I knit this in my rock mill hat pattern, which has a ribbed brim here, and then combination of broken rib and garter, which I feel like is the right amount of interest added into the hat, but like does not overwhelm the yarn. I was initially thinking maybe something cabled for my mom because I think she would really like the look of that, but with the amount of like pizzazz in the yarn itself, I felt a simple pattern would stand out a lot nicer and like really highlight the beautiful yarn. So I need to, at this point, ship this off to my mother so she can have this very belated Christmas gift at this point. So I will be doing that here in the coming weeks. I actually finished this right after the new year, and here it is like towards the end of January, and I still have not shipped this off. But there's also another thing that I want to ship to my parents when I ship this to them, so that is why things have been delayed. But overall, this was a really fun and fast project. I cast it on, I can't remember exactly when I cast it on. I think it was like right after I cast off my hat for my daughter. I cast this one on for my mom. I think I cast it on maybe like the day after Christmas, and it took me until like January 1st to knit it. So it was a really, really fast knit. And I was also knitting on other things. I was actually working on my Harlow sweater as the primary project right at the end of the year there. That one I finished up at 11:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Squeaked it right in under the wire for 2025 knits there. But this one was just a little bit later and landed in 2026. That being said, very happy with it, and I am excited to send this off to my mom. That was quite a lot of finished objects. I have 2 works in progress to talk about, so a little bit of a smaller portion of the podcast here. The first one that I have is a sweater project that I have in my project bag here. I cast this on at the beginning of January, maybe like a few days into January, and I've already made quite a lot of progress on this sweater. So I am knitting a champagne cardigan by Petite Knit, and this is my very first Petite Knit pattern, and I can say I have not been disappointed so far. I will make the slight same complaint about the schematic situation. There is actually a schematic for this one, but I do wish it was a slightly more detailed schematic, like listing a few more measurements on the schematic, so that you can see exactly where things are in terms of all of the garment measurements in case you wanted to make adjustments. So again, that's just kind of like a me thing. I like seeing a really detailed schematic because I have like a lot of knowledge around what I like in terms of fit and what measurements compare to what kind of fit it is and what kind of fit I like personally. So you can confirm that yes, this is in the measurement range for this kind of fit that I like, or oh, this is a more fitted garment or a more oversized garment and I like this kind of range for oversized, or I like this kind of range for fitted. It just gives you a lot of really good information. That being said, if you're not familiar with like what the numbers mean in terms of how you like it to fit, I can see how it's like less useful. But as you knit more sweaters and like measure the sweaters that you actually knit and compare those measurements to your own body measurements, it's so informative and helps you make sweaters that you really, really like, that you like to wear, and you know, fit the desired aesthetic, like fit aesthetic, silhouette, etc. that you're going for. Numbers are really, really helpful. Granted, I have like 15 plus years of sweater knitting experience at this point under my belt, so I have like a lot of context for what I like and what I don't like. Anyway, all of this to say, I think this is a really great sweater so far. I really like it. It is straightforward to follow. I have had 0 questions so far, and the thing that people don't always realize about a top-down raglan construction is that raglans are actually some of the most complex things to knit because you're shaping one front, 2 fronts, sleeves, back, all at the same time. I guess the easy portion comes out in the fact that like sometimes for raglans you're doing the same shaping rate across all of these points, so you're just like, oh, I increase around the markers all the way around all the time. But the thing is, to get a good fit, you're not always doing that, and that's where it becomes tricky. And if you layer on, say, a stitch pattern into there, things can get actually pretty complex And I don't really know where I'm going with this other than raglans are a little bit more complex than you might think at first glance, because yes, it's one piece, but that means you're doing everything at the same time. All right, so here is this cardigan on, and I will say that I probably will not wear this over something as heavy as what I'm wearing here. That being said, it totally does fit, and I'm sure it'll be even a little bit more relaxed once I wash and block this. I have not blocked it yet, of course. Well, I mean, I could have done a mid-project blocked, but I have not done a mid-project block on this. So I've actually made it pretty far in the past couple of weeks since I cast this on. I knit the yoke divided for the sleeves, and then I knit like a ball's worth of yarn at the body before coming back to the sleeves. And I've knit all of one sleeve over here and just barely started the second one, and I'm sure I'm going to end up with like stitches popping off the needles over here. And so here's what this one is looking like so far. You just have a nice V neckline, a very deep raglan yoke. Well, I guess it's not like super deep, but like my armpit is here and the yoke is way down here, so there's definitely a lot of room for layering, which is nice for a relaxed cardigan that you know, want to be cozy in the wintertime. And then just a deep 1x1 ribbed cuff with an Italian tubular bind off, and also with the 2 setup rows of double knitting before the bind off. And I do feel like that adds a nice amount of structure. So if you don't do those setup rows, things can get a little bit wobbly. And I guess by wobbly, I mean like, you know, just like stretchy. And if you're not careful with how you execute your tubular bind off, it can end up kind of flaring out a little bit. So doing the setup rows definitely helps to prevent things from flaring out, adds a little bit more structure there at the cuff to prevent it from flaring out, and you know, it just provides some nice stability. So I definitely appreciate that detail that she added into the pattern. And I guess I'll zoom back in a little bit here. So as I said, I really appreciated the added double knitting rows prior to the tubular bind off instruction, just for a really nice neat finish there at the cuff. So far I have not made any like true modifications. Again, I just went down a size from what's recommended for my actual bust circumference, because I like things less oversized than these designers tend to like things for themselves. So I am knitting a size small versus a size medium would have been recommended for my size. Same thing that I did for the Harlow Sweater by Kadri. Also knit a small instead of a medium. Generally, I consider myself very much like a size medium person. Like when I go buy clothes at ready-to-wear places, like I am pretty much always a size medium, like honestly size medium to sometimes size large depending on like what the store is. Like I'm rarely a size small. Take that with a grain of salt, because I know everywhere is like wildly inconsistent on sizing, and that may just be the stores that I personally have been shopping at. Again, I tend to have a slightly less oversized preference. I like, you know, slimmer fitting things than the trends currently are. So for me, oversized is something like this, where on someone else that may just be like their regular fit, so their oversized fit would indeed be that size up. So I'm knitting this sweater in Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino. So this is the slight gray color. It's just a nice, you know, mid-tone, darker heather gray color, just kind of a nice casual gray that will go with a lot of my wardrobe. It'll go with nearly everything. So one additional thing that I did differently other than knitting a size down was to lengthen the sleeve. So the sleeve seemed like oddly short as recommended. It was only 12 or 13 or so inches before starting the ribbing, and then several inches of ribbing. So it was like less than a 17-inch from underarm sleeve, and I feel like usually I like 18, 19 inches from underarm. And of course it's going to be a little bit different based on what sleeve construction you're doing. So like an oversized drop shoulder may have a slightly shorter sleeve, because like if your underarm starts like way out here in your bicep, of course your underarm seam length is going to be shorter. But for a raglan, which is a little bit closer fitting, that's kind of going to be more of an in-between sleeve, and I felt the sleeve recommendation was like wildly short. Maybe if you were knitting like the next size up, you would have, you know, a little bit of a deeper yoke, and therefore a little like it would, you know, sit out here a little bit, but I still feel like the sleeve length would have been really short, and I don't think I have particularly like long arms. I'm 5'5", relatively average height, and yeah, just felt like a short sleeve to at least to my preference. I know some people prefer more of like a bracelet sleeve. I don't. I generally prefer a sleeve to sit further down across my wrist, especially for something like a cardigan. I want it to be cozy. I want to be able to like grab my sweater cuff. And I know this will relax and grow somewhat after I block it, but like, you know, this is barely at my wrist point here, and it'll probably grow to maybe like the lower part of my thumb knuckle, maybe a little bit longer. But yeah, I just felt the sleeve was weirdly short. I haven't gone into the Ravelry comments to see if anyone else felt the same way that I did, but just thought I would throw that out there in case anyone else is knitting this pattern. I know a lot of people have already knit this pattern, and often when you're like knitting a sleeve, you're just like, especially in a top-down pattern, you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna knit this until it's the length that I like before the amount of cuff that I need to do. And it's really not a big deal at all to adjust that, but just wanted to throw it out there. So I think that is all I have to say about the champagne cardigan for now. I am excited to continue knitting this one. I think this is going to be a great wardrobe staple for me. I will just, you know, continue working away at this. It's really nice to just work something in stockinette that I literally don't have to think about because somebody else has done all of the work for writing pattern for me. And I've been using that as a nice way to wind down from the evening. So like I'll put my daughter to bed, I'll come upstairs and work on my spreadsheets for my cardigan pattern that I'm working on, and then just like shut my brain off and knit in stockinette on this project. That's been so nice to do. So that's a really nice balance for me. I think I'm going to continue doing that. Once I get this off the needles, I'm probably going to cast on another Petite Knit pattern for my daughter, since I have a little cardigan that I want to knit for her that's like a basic stockinette situation, but same kind of thing. So I can continue knitting, but like not need to be occupying my brain space while I've already occupied it with something else, as in pattern writing and like getting the things done there. So it's nice to kind of have a balance in that way. All right, so last project to talk about, and this is a bit of a rogue cast on. This was not anywhere on my fall and winter knitting plans. I just purchased some yarn over the holidays. I got several skeins of Destination Yarns holiday collection, and I was very, very inspired by one of them. I guess I'll pull out the color here to show you. It is just a very beautiful velvety red. It is actually called Red Velvet, so yes, velvety red. And it just like made me want to cast on a Valentine's Day sock. And that's what I did. So I actually did a good bit of swatching first. So I'll show you this swatch that I have here. Having a little bit of trouble getting this to focus here, but I hope you can see this, but there is like cabling. Well, it's faux cabling in this, creates like a textured rib column over here. And then I tried out some twisted stitches into regular rib stitches. And then here I was playing with a little bit of eyelet. So it's kind of like a mixed rib pointelle inspired stitch pattern that I've been working on here. And that's because I've been seeing a lot of pointelle sweaters in ready to wear. Sometimes I'll just like keep seeing a similar like texture or stitch and like not want to recreate the same thing and like the same stitch, but want to create something that has the same vibe or is in the same realm as the kind of stitch that I keep seeing in ready to wear. So that's where the idea for the sock came about, and I have indeed cast on this sock, and even once it got onto the needles, I still had like quite a bit of trial and error going on. So here is the sock cuff that I've been working on. So you have kind of that textured rib made with faux cables here, followed by some twisted rib, and then the little eyelet section here. And I've actually reworked this eyelet section several times. So if you'll look at the swatch, like I had a little bit of a different thing going on where you have like the point and then like an eyelet in the middle. And it took a few iterations to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I decided to like remove the eyelet from the middle and just have like the top and bottom points. So I actually ended up like ripping out this whole section here, and not like ripping out the whole sock, but just laddering down in this section to get the eyelet right. So let me show you the other side, which I have not fixed yet. So here is what the other side looks like. So I still have the eyelet in the middle and everything. And also like the increases and decreases are a little bit all over the place. So it just kind of looks a little bit messy on this side. So I need to ladder down on this side as well to fix it. but it's looking so much cleaner and nicer on this side. I really love it at this point. Here you can really see like the lace exposure on this side. Let me try that over here. Here, just like, it doesn't look as like clean or pretty with like that amount of lace exposure. Anyway, it is a sock cuff. I'm actually like probably pretty close to the point where I'm gonna be starting the heel. But yes, this was just kind of a road cast on. I got inspired by the concept of pointelle and decided that I wanted a romantic pair of deep red pointelle socks, and I'm making that happen with these. And it will be a design because as I said, I was just kind of swatching and figuring out what I wanted it to be, and then having to do some reworking on the needles here. I may insert some footage of like the yarn chaos that happens when you're laddering down, you know, several inches, like 4 inches of cuff, and then fixing it. Surprisingly, it did not take as long as I thought. It took me approximately, I think, maybe a little bit more than an hour to correct the other side. So it's like absolutely worth it to just ladder down and fix rather than reknit. And that was also doing it twice. So I initially just fixed the decrease placement to make things look like less wobbly. And then I decided I wanted to remove that eyelet in the middle of like the 2 arrows, and so then I had to rip it all back down again and redo it. Fortunately, once there were less eyelets in there, then it actually went a lot faster. So the second time should probably take me less than an hour because I now have practice laddering down. I actually know what the stitch pattern is now and that I will like it, so that I won't have to do any further reworking. So it shouldn't take me too long to fix the other side. And then I can just fly along the rest of the foot and, you know, knit the second sock and all of that. I think the second sock is going to look a lot nicer because, you know, when you're laddering down and laddering back up, the gauge does end up being a little bit different than, you know, what it naturally is when you're knitting. So I will be excited to see what it looks like in the lower half of the sock, and then also have a, you know, super pretty even cuff on the second sock as well. But anyway, this pattern will be coming out eventually. I have no name for it. I do have a chart for it, and it'll probably end up coming out before the cardigan that I'm working on right now, just because accessories are a little bit easier to put together in terms of like all of the pieces of the pattern that need to happen, and also the preview knitting length is significantly shorter. You don't need to knit 2 because they're knit the same, therefore, you know, again, like a couple of weeks is plenty versus, you know, at least 2 months for a sweater. So anyway, all of that to say, this will be coming out at some point. I need to come up with a name for it. If you have any ideas on what you think the name should be, I would love to hear about it in the comments because I currently have 0 ideas for what I should call this sock. I'm really pleased with how this is turning out so far, and I know that I'm going to love the finished sock. I have used Destination Yarn Postcard on several socks at this point, and it is like my favorite sock yarn base to work with. I have some socks that I knit, I think about a decade ago at this point, and they are still holding up great. The dye still looks, you know, reasonably good considering that like I'm wearing it in shoes. Things are going to get a little bit dingy and dirty over time, you know, wearing in boots and all of that, but I've been like wearing them in boots for like 10 years of winters, which is really, really good. So I know that these are gonna hold up over time. And that is not something that you can always say about every sock yarn, especially when, like me, you are not very nice to your socks. You throw them in the washer and in the dryer. So sometimes things end up felting a bit over time or losing more color than you'd like. But these will be a really, really great sock because Destination Yarn uses an amazing sock base to dye their colors. Definitely recommend checking them out. Well, I've been chatting here for quite a while now and we are starting to lose light. My daughter's gonna be waking up from her nap soon, so I guess it is time for me to wrap things up. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching this far if you've made it. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button and subscribe if you have not already. I put out a podcast every couple of weeks to share all about my knitting progress, so if that is something that you'd like to see and not miss out on those future videos, hit that subscribe button. I will also put in a little plug here for my newsletter list since I've been talking about various new designs here on this podcast. So if you sign up, you'll get 40% off all new released patterns when those become available. And also when you first sign up, you'll get a 25% off discount code that you can use on any pattern purchase. So you could buy one pattern or multiple if you would like. And I have a back catalog of more than 100 designs, so there is quite a lot to look at there. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.